Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast, the official podcast of Pineland, broadcasting to you from an undisclosed location deep inside Pineland, where we discuss faith, family, finances, firearms, freedom, food, and everything else in between, with those who believe in living free and living out the values that made this country free. All right, welcome to the Pinelander Podcast. My name is Paul LaFavor, and you're listening to the podcast for America's Warriors. I'm here with my Ranger buddy, Mike Blackburn, and today is Saturday, the 6th of September, 2024. In this episode, we're talking with our new guest, first time on the podcast, Special Forces.
Wait, what day and month is it?
Oh, it's September 6th. We went in the time machine. Hey, we have... first time on the podcast, Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Raiklin. Welcome to the podcast, sir. Yes.
Retired, I guess.
Well, we'll throw in retired there, but you still got the mojo. Yeah, exciting. We were able to see you on the Hodge twins. We don't have the video for this, but for our listeners, you can just imagine how animated this man is. This man is one heck of a model American. Imagine like a knife in his mouth right now, like a pirate. But as we've been advertising for probably the last 3 years on our podcast, this is a podcast for America's Warriors, and it's for guys that love America, that have red-blooded guys, barrel-chested. And so our guest today is someone who's not only fought for our country, but he's continuing to fight for our country. And so welcome to the podcast, sir.
Gentlemen, this is great. This is the first, I think this is almost said the wrong thing. This is my debut.
Yes.
With warriors such as yourself on such a podcast. So, I mean, you definitely are, you carried the baton for 20 years yourself, so appreciate you doing it, man. I learned from people like you when I was going to the Q course. Barely made it through. I squeaked by everything. Barely passed every phase. Barely passed and became a Green Beret.
I think we can all say the same thing, though.
Barely passed team time.
That about sums it up for all of us, I think.
Well, listen, recycle just makes you better anyway. I mean, I had to recycle Florida phase down at Ranger School, so it just made me a better Ranger. Hey, listen, Colonel Raiklin, here's the big thing that has been a concern to a lot of us is kind of like just how they handled the whole COVID thing and the forced vaccinations. Paul and I had a lot of friends that were given the ultimatum, inject yourself with the bioweapon or get out. No retirement. I mean, I have friends over at 19 years, and they were forcing these dudes out or get the shot. What's going to happen with this? And is there going to be any justice at the end of this?
Yes. Are you guys tracking the Declaration of Military Accountability that was launched on January 1st of this year?
Yes. So where are we at? Where are we at with that?
Well, let me kind of give a little context before we go into where we're at with that, if I can.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir.
So here's how, based on my research and analysis, things went down. So in 2020, when they observed that President Trump was drawing still tens of thousands of people, crowds, and he was, going to secure the nomination, he was on a glide path for a re-election. The people that are on my deep state target list, specific categories known as those that were at the FTLI, DOJ, and the CIA that ran the illegal spying operation on President Trump, they realized that they couldn't slow roll anymore protecting their exposure and risk to retribution without removing President Trump. Okay? So they had to concoct some sort of a methodology to be able to make it look like the coup that they were about to do would be legitimate, and then make money hand over fist with the biggest transfer of wealth that we've ever seen in our nation's history take place. Remember that similar things happened. Remember when 2008, the financial crisis happened.
That's right.
That was a big move. They expected Hillary Clinton to just roll right in 2016. That's why there wasn't a calamitous time at that time. And it wasn't until 2020 we had this forced, coerced, manipulated calamity. And the reason being is that it was essentially the final nail of an exploratory cover-up campaign for the FBI's role in all the illegal shenanigans. And I can name you individual names, right, of who was involved at the FBI and the CIA related to that. And those are categories on my deep state target list. So the CIA component consists of the 51 spies who lied, almost entirely CIA, that covered for the Biden criminal syndicate laptop. And that would have been in October 2020 timeframe. But even before that, before they covered the CIA, you had the FBI, Brian Auten, right? He was the supervisory intel analyst at the Foreign Influence Task Force at that time when they did the whole censorship industrial complex with his former colleagues at the FBI. Remember, Brian Auten used to be the supervisory intel analyst at the Crossfire Hurricane team. And his colleagues were Joe Pientka, the third, the senior supervisory special agent that ran the ops side of that investigation, subordinate to Peter Strzok, Bill Priestap, the head of counterintel at FBI. Another person that I'll mention is Catherine Seaman, that worked for Peter Strzok, who was Mike Pence's chief of staff's wife. So Mike Pence was involved in all of this, as well as his chief of staff. Andy McCabe, the deputy director, and then the director, Jim Comey. So that was the Crossfire Hurricane op. And another guy I failed to mention is Jim Baker, who was the general counsel at the FBI that authorized that illegal spying. Now, I'm setting the frame and context to the COVID time. I'm getting there. Pientka's out in the San Francisco field office. Jim Baker, the general counsel, then is moved out to be the number 2 lawyer at Twitter 1.0, while Brian Auten is essentially working with Laura Demlow, the section chief for the Foreign Influence Task Force. Laura's now the number 2 person for all of CI at the ODNI in Bethesda, Maryland. She's the deputy. But anyway, when she was there at the Foreign Influence Task Force, it was the organization created by Christopher Wray, who I later call Christopher Wray Epps. And you all know why.
Yep.
Because of January 6th. The director, Chris Wray, essentially creates in 2017, late 2018, the Foreign Influence Task Force to perpetuate the lie that Russia was involved in their electoral heist in 2016 to lay blame on Russia. And so they institutionalized that lie through the creation of this section known as the FITF, Foreign Influence Task Force, that was the focal point from the FBI in coordination with a newly formed organization known as DHS's Cyber Security and Information Security Agency, known as CISA, headed up by Chris Krebs, who was appointed by Mike Pence, to coordinate the digital and later physical censorship scheme on whatever they wanted to censor, that they labeled as malinformation. In other words, truthful information that exposed their criminality would be censored. And so those were the individuals that ran that censorship industrial complex, as evidenced by all of the Twitter files released by Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi. One of the components of the censorship industrial complex regime to perpetuate their grift corruption and cover up for the illegal election that they conducted in 2020, and then before that, the setup for the illegal election. Because in order for them to do an electoral heist, they had to do a few things. They had to level the playing field so that President Trump would have to be the equivalent of Dementia Joe in his basement, meaning there had to be lockdowns, right? They had to create the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Fauci-funded lab incident. And then Mike Pence had to take the role as the White House coronavirus task force lead, where he guided Anthony Fauci, his subordinate. And he guided Debbie Birx, his subordinate, his being Mikey Pence, in conjunction with, and he co-opted, and this is where some people are like, ooh, he named his name. You can look it up for yourself. Good old Jared Kushner was the shadow governor of the White House Coronavirus Task Force as they promoted policies and made decisions related to who would get the ventilators to execute people in the hospitals and who would get those contracts. And they doled out contracts for the face toilets, right? The PPE. And then subsequently that turned into the discussion on the jabs, right? So, who was involved in promoting safe and effective? And who was involved in telling people that ivermectin was horse dewormer and you couldn't use it? It was Brian Naughton, Laura Demlow at the FITF. It was Chris Krebs over at CISA. And they coordinated with folks at the ODNI as they held meetings with Twitter 1.0 and big tech players beyond. How? Through the FBI field office in San Francisco. Elvis Chan was another name that was involved in that in San Francisco. The other person would have been Jim Baker, who was the number 2 lawyer at Twitter. And they coordinated this entire censorship scheme to let people believe, to include members of the DOD and the U.S. government, that you must take the jab, and that the FDA approval was legitimate. All the lies and the schemery were done by these core group of people that convinced American society in the collective through the information landscape that everything was safe and effective, that the 2020 election was the most safe and secure endeavor ever known in human history. It was the most pristine endeavor that any mammal or any race has experienced, they led us to believe, of the 2020 election. And the same thing applies to the COVID time, all aspects of it. And so then you had the entire DOD chain of command down to the lowest corporal that bought hook, line, and sinker the theme that they must coerce and manipulate someone else into accepting the jab. I'll pause there.
Wow.
Okay, well, that pretty much lays the groundwork for
A lot of the groundwork.
because I mean, I've had conversations with generals that had to make the call, and this was National Guard, but there was some pushback from some of the National Guard units and states.
Yeah.
And his justification for
Texas and Missouri primarily.
yes, but unfortunately, this tag went the other direction, and he, his defense of his argument is, well, I did all the research, everything that they were putting out to me, and it looked like the right call. And so at some point, I'm kind of
why they thought it was the right call because they were relying on the FBI's.
Yes.
They didn't know all the duping,
That's right.
coercion, the manipulating, and the censorship going on in the background.
That's right.
Because people like me that were sounding the shofar maximally with maximal decibels, we were the first ones to be censored.
That's right. And so in his defense, and in a lot of these people's defense, these various agencies and individuals that you would like to rely upon to get good, credible, information, that just wasn't happening. I mean, this thing was just...
I would agree with that for the first few weeks, maximally the first few months.
But after
that, they then became complicit.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
there was a lot of people. Yeah, there was a lot of people that were going, hey, hold on a minute. There's something not right here.
Because we broke. So in my instance, I'll give you an example of my case. So first I was digitally censored on LinkedIn back in 2020 for referencing the Constitution and referencing the Electoral Count Act and then referencing CDC's own vaccine adverse events reporting system. This is government laws, federal government laws and databases. And I was being censored for it. one of the main reasons why is because big pharma, let's just put it this way. It all makes sense when you lay it out down to like the link analysis. You're at 18 Fox. So link analysis.
Follow the money.
Financial relationships. Follow the money. Guess what? Who Twitter 1.0's official fact checker was? It was an organization known as Reuters. Some people pronounce Reuters. Who is the CEO of Roy Thomson Reuters? James Smith. Where does he serve as a board member? Pfizer.
I knew you were going to say that. I was hoping you weren't going to say that, but
so if you're on the board of the biggest DNA mutilation injection platform on the planet, right? The heart exploding DNA mutilation injection, unsafe and ineffective product, and you're trying to convince the world that this is the most safe and secure required thing to be able to sell hand over fist, so that you can continue to sponsor Faux News, Criminal News Network, and MSLSD, and Washington Compost, and New Woke Slimes through your advertising dollars. You have to promote this product as literally the elixir of life. And you do that through your exactly. And you do it through your beloved organizations that you control. So if you're a board member of the product you're trying to sell, and you have this media outreach where you decide what's true and false, you're going to leverage that maximally by convincing the Twitterati, right, that the Pfizer fail injection is the most safe and effective product known in human history. It is the most pristine, beloved, life-enhancing fluid,
miracle juice,
cusped in the needle, that you must consume. Total, absolute, superlative excellence just oozes out of that needle, is what they were promoting the censors to do, meaning they're fact checkers. And guess who was involved at Twitter making sure that was running full steam ahead? The former general counsel of the FBI, Jim Baker, who signed off on the illegal spying op of candidate Trump. So when you go into those level of details, down to the pixel level human, by name, date, place, and transgression, what happens? You got to cancel Ivan because he's bringing receipts. And then when he continues to bring receipts in person to state legislatures like in Arizona, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in New Hampshire, and you're now considered a belligerent, illegitimate regime squatting in the White House after a failed, illegitimate, illegally certified election, you want to stop Ivan Raiklin, and you want to label him as an insider threat, and you want to put him on the Quiet Skies program and surveil him with 3 federal air marshals everywhere he goes physically, and you try to intimidate him, just like I'm hearing doing to Tulsi Gabbard as of 2 days ago. And guess what I do? I put my 4 middle fingers up and said GFY before Elon Musk did. And I said, hey, if you're going to digitally and physically try to censor me, I'm going to drive everywhere instead of fly. I'll still make it to my destinations to try to convince hundreds to thousands of people of what the truth is. And we're going to break that censorship mold. And so far, they've been able to survive. But I have stood my ground as well as others, continuing to prove them wrong. I'm like 1,000-0 in my conspiracies. So now I think you should label me as a conspiracy oracle.
Well, it sounds like you just have something against Marxism, Colonel. I mean, is there something in your DNA? You just have something against Marxism? I mean,
give communism a chance.
I mean, come on.
It never works. Why not? Yeah, it doesn't have a history. It has a criminal record. But let's just try it.
It's funny.
Hey, I will say this though, in all seriousness, I am probably one of the biggest supporters of BLM, but it's actually spelled out Biden laptops matter.
That's right. Yeah.
Nice.
So
Nice.
Where do we go? What pull out your crystal ball and how's
my oracle? You want me to do another oracle?
Let's do some oracle stuff because this is in some regards it's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
When you have a takeover at these high levels, and so you're sitting there going, man, I hope there's a solution to this thing, and what do we need to do?
I think I failed to answer your question that you originally asked before we go there.
Well, yeah, it's like what happens? Where's the justice at, right?
Let me give you some context.
Yeah.
Did I cover the COVID stuff sufficiently? You think?
No, I think you've laid that. I think you've laid that foundation. Yeah.
I think. Oh, it was the Declaration of Military Accountability.
Yeah.
Where are we at, and then where are we going in general terms?
Right.
So with the Declaration of Military Accountability, the next line of effort is every single person of the 231 that signed, and everybody that also signed on through militaryaccountability.com and that are generally supportive of going and having accountability for the senior leaders in the DOD, we need to now create maximum, I call it motivation. To the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers, who is a captured agent of Big Pharma and complicit in all of this. Knowing that full well, we have to create a counter motivation that is much greater than his beloved Big Pharma handlers and the corrupt scheme that he's protecting at the DOD, to motivate him to hold hearings in September, starting September 9th when they're back in the session, to go ahead and bring in folks like Brad Miller to testify, to bring in folks like, I don't know, Carolyn Rocco, Robert Green, basically those on the front page of the Declaration of Military Accountability signatories, Lieutenant Mark Bashaw, and everybody that I basically called out Joe Rogan for not interviewing, and that's why that little punk is number 2 after Tucker, because he doesn't speak enough truth. He only talks about some truth, and then he's like, am I doing okay? Are you going to cancel me? Oh, I was just joking. I'm not going to speak much truth, just a little bit about the ivermectin and the horse dewormer. Yeah. That little punk needs to, grow a pair. Yes. And start speaking truth in all aspects.
Yeah, that's just the West Coast in him. Is what that is. He's got a little too much West Coast.
Yeah. So let me say this: he's a Bernie bro, right? Well, how about you tell the truth? He's got a platform. Well, if he doesn't, we're gonna surpass him. I'll just keep pushing myself until we surpass him, because the truth needs to get out there.
That's true.
It might take time, whatever. I get it. Now, I'll say this. If you're listening in or know anybody in Eastern Alabama in the 3rd Congressional District, which is Mike Rogers' district, I need you to reach out to me. info@Raiklin.com. And I want to know who the biggest donors, supporters, business owners, influencers in the 3rd Congressional District. I think that's Auburn, Alabama. Please reach out to me so that I can explain to you what you can do to help make sure that we expose and create consequences to the maximal highest order known as Nuremberg 2.0 on Lloyd Austin, Mark Milley, and the entire DOD leadership all the way down through the ranks that forced and coerced another into mutilating themselves, known as the DNA mutilation injections.
Yep.
And then we create the maximal consequences. But we start with Mike Rogers. Rep Mike Rogers AL is his Twitter, his X account. And while August is Joe Pienko Awareness Month, who's the whistleblower that's going to expose all the other stuff that we discussed so far. I think that also motivation needs to be applied to Mike Rogers to the maximum level so that he starts to actually do something. And when he doesn't, everybody will see that he's also captured. By the way, he's a Republican.
Yeah, that doesn't really matter these days too much.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So where else, or what else do we
So
have?
where are we going?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Where are we going? Here's where we're going. September 3rd is the ideal date for Elon Musk to release the mother of all Twitter files. A little background on that. Elon, remember, you look at my deep state target list of about 600 folks, and then you see that I list their Twitter accounts. They have active, and they did have active Twitter accounts. Imagine that Elon Musk decides to, working with Michael Schellenberger, who I've spoken with, and Matt Taibbi, who I had a 5-hour meeting with last week, and Ken Paxton, the AG of Texas, who I may or may not have been communicating with his office. I'll leave it at that. Coordinates the mother of all Twitter files, which will include all of the communications related to COVIDCon, the censorship of COVIDCon, meaning the 3 main silos of information held by Twitter: the emails, the internal Slack channel deliberations, and the direct messages with geotagged evidence and metadata associated with those communications, so that Elon Musk can release the mother of all Twitter files now that he, 1, is supporting President Trump and endorsed him, and 2, he's moving Twitter headquarters from California to Texas. Now, Ken Paxton will have full jurisdiction over that criminal trove of evidentiary communication, and providing Elon the top cover for it, and subpoenaing it, and then releasing it in the court of public opinion so that America realizes, oh, wow, what Ivan Raiklin is saying is backed up by evidence beyond any shadow of a doubt, which is beyond the reasonable doubt standard. So not only are we going to go after them civilly, we're going to go after them criminally. And we're going to go after them criminally in the states, Texas. And if, for example, the communications occurred in Kansas or Louisiana, or name the state that has a red attorney general that's willing to do the same thing that Peekaboo James did in New York, or name the red county district attorney that is now willing to do the same precedent that was set by Fulton Fanny or Fat Albert Bragg in Manhattan, to then go ahead and charge the members of my deep state target list. And then it will be up to the law enforcement of those counties, namely the sheriffs, that will implement the precedent set by their colleagues over at the U.S. Capitol Police. And, for example, Michael Byrd, when he conducted, quote unquote, objectively reasonable actions on Ashley Babbitt, when he slaughtered her on January 6th, or when Metropolitan Police Department Officer Lila Morris, in an objectively reasonable manner, they said, slaughtered Roseanne Boyland on January 6th. So that's the tool of precedent that has already been set, that we just need Elon Musk to provide the criminal evidence for, to then actually action those targets. And then once the evidence is out, that's when Tucker Carlson can amplify, and that's when Joe Rogan can amplify, Elon Musk can amplify himself, or we can amplify it. And then the solution to all of this, quickly, is going to be demand our state legislatures invoke their authorities under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of our U.S. Constitution to hold a joint session vote of their state legislature to vote on their electors for their state on November 5th. And if every state does that, or at least the Republican states that have majority Republican legislatures, then we already have 274 electoral votes that go to the Republican nominee in the most free, fair, transparently live streamed vote in person, live streamed, fully transparent manner. And then those electoral votes are then transmitted to the 119th Congress, which is the next Congress, on January 6th. And that is the solution, folks. Absent that, I don't see a mechanism where they allow President Trump to win the election. They either, once again, attempt and are successful in an assassination, or number two, they will go ahead and rely on Paul Ryan and faux news to go ahead and call in the $850 million bribe, investment, settlement that faux news did with deviant voting systems a few months ago, and ask them to go ahead and create an electoral outcome of faux news's choosing in the general election, since the deviant voting systems controls 28 of the states' electoral infrastructure in some way, shape, or form, thus being able to manipulate the electoral outcome of their choosing, just like they did in 2020. So the only way to circumvent the digital, software, foreign interference, illegal voting, dirty voter rolls, fraud at all levels, is to have the state legislatures actually in-person live vote for how that state's going to allocate their electors for president and vice president. So I presented you the problem by name, date, place, and transgression of who the individuals are. I've laid out the phase of getting the political courage for these state legislatures to actually conduct the vote how they should. This is how the presidential election occurred in the early part of our country. They can reclaim it again. And the driving factor behind it is, one, Elon Musk releasing that information, key influencers sharing that at scale and explaining at this point, now that everybody knows that the 2020 election and all the COVID con schemery and all the illegal spying that I've been talking about for years is true beyond any doubt. Now let's solve it. And then we create the political courage to these toxic, feckless, stone cold coward, gutless simp Republicans that control the majority of the electoral votes to actually hold the vote. And if it's done live in person, they're going to have to face their constituents if they vote for the Democrat nominee. And I suspect that their constituents are going to respond in a manner much more aggressive than what we did to Adam Kinzinger or Lizzie Cheney. Make sense?
Yeah. Hey, so if I could jump in there, so I think out of the three of us, I'm probably the least read on to all this stuff because I'm usually in my little cubicle getting ready for my Sunday sermons, and I read a lot of dusty books and stuff like that. So, and I completely agree with everything you just said. I know it's true. Let's just say for the person out there that's on the fence and they say, can that really be happening? Could that really have happened? What do you say to that? Like
Which part?
You laid out everything already in the beginning, but like the main tentacles of all of this deep state, because you laid out some of the tentacles already with the social engineering, with getting everyone in a slave mindset, and then weaponizing everything. I mean, how would you, like, what's the short answer for someone who says there's no way that actually happened?
Well, I'm assuming you've got the receipts. I mean, this is not stuff that you're just sitting around making up.
I know. I mean, look, I'm the layman here, but I know the vote was stolen totally. Because
the shortest answer is go to my Rumble channel and pick and choose whatever long form interview I've done.
Yeah.
And on that long form interview, I bring the documentary receipts as I discuss it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Hot Friends interview is not it's not a family friendly conversation.
Yeah, and you basically have to have a brain because there's a lot of like Idiocracy was a mockumentary. Now it's a documentary. I mean, we've watched Americans become dumber and dumber. So you actually have to know. You have to be informed.
I've spent thousands of hours digging and living through and observing all of this. So then, if you're trying to rely on another source for it, there really isn't one other than for you to go through the same process that I went through. So if you have, there isn't a short answer. The shortest answer is I can give you a link to an interview that I've done, which lays out all the evidence behind it. I mean, you can go to my Tucker interview that I did, some of what we discussed with the military component of it. You can go to the 3-hour interview I did with Alpha Warrior. It's on my Rumble channel. It's about 3 hours, and it goes into the details of everything related to January 6th and who was involved in that, the Fed's direction, and then the subsequent cover-up. Okay? And then why I'm involved in investigating and what my role was in that. If you want to go into the COVID con, I'm probably one of the biggest voices on this particular topic, bringing in the receipts. So there is no easy button. And for the,
you can't
I'm
be
not
lazy.
here to, so I'm not the guy to communicate it to those that are still on Facebook. I mean, take it for what it's worth. You're dead to me. You're part of the problem.
Yeah.
You're on Instagarbage, you're part of the problem. You are on TommyTube, you're part of the problem, because you're only consuming what those that created this are keeping you in their box to make sure that you stay within line, within the fence, within the cognitive fence that they've created for you. So until you're ready to stop with the excuses of, well, my friends and my family and all the people are still on Facebook and everybody, all the user engagement, the algorithm convinces me that I'm getting more views on Instagarbage and all these likes that I'm getting. Well, guess what? If you want to continue to provide gas to Hitler as you walk into the chamber, that's your choice. You're a grown man or woman. And so maybe that's a good thing. Like, lead yourself to extermination. I'm not going to participate in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
I mean, like, let the sheep lead themselves to slaughter.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to listen to what I have to say, that's their choice. But I'm going to do as many podcast interviews and explain in as the greatest detail as I can.
Yeah, like we said,
and if
you're
it resonates, and if it triggers folks to research on their own, great.
You're a trailblazer.
Now they're telling you, don't do your own research. Listen to them. Okay, great. Well, homie, don't play that. Because, I mean, let's face it, guys. Like, if you compare your background and experience to name the pundit, you have more experience in critical thinking ability than anybody out there. Like, I used to teach intelligence analysis at DIA, critical thinking, creative thinking, biases and mitigating biases, like a 2-week course on how to be a professional analyst. I apply the same process to addressing these concerns that I had. It was like, what the hell happened with this COVID thing? And I dig. What happened on January 6th? And then I dig. But when I dig, I use all the different structured analytic techniques that I used to teach. The link analysis. After 25 years in the system, I probably know a few people. I probably know people at DHS, at FBI, at DOJ, at every single entity, right? That I can ping hypotheses and theories, bounce hypotheses and theories off of. And all I ask them is, anything that I explained to you so far, do you have evidence that's inconsistent with that? That doesn't require them to tell me anything that they're under an NDA or classified information. It's a general question. I lay out my case, and then at the end I ask, is there any evidence that you have that would make my theory, that you have the evidence is inconsistent with my analysis?
Right.
Thus far, not a single person that I've known for decades and trust that are still in the system has told me that. And when they say that there might be another additional piece of evidence or information out there, I ask them to provide me a hint that would not make them violate any rules. And that's how I've been able to survive 20 investigations that they've done on me. Because I've ran this entire investigative scheme in the most legal, moral, ethical fashion known in human history. Unlike them.
Yeah, exactly. Now this has been,
I guess.
I mean, this has been,
because I got dirt on every one of them.
Yeah, well, this has been decades in the making. I mean, they didn't just this isn't even something that just they put together under, within a few years. I mean, this has been a process that an aim
exactly.
of theirs.
Who do you
Go ahead.
Who do you think was behind the JFK?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
why would they still have it classified? Is it possibly because George H.W. Bush?
Yeah, was
may know a thing or two.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really amazing, and of course, in our field, in our branch, I mean, we get a taste of unconventional warfare. We learn some tradecraft, basic tradecraft, and how this stuff is done. And some of us have, been practitioners overseas in third world countries of some of this stuff. Now, I think within our community, I think what's kind of shocking and what many people still in uniform are amazed at is the fact that these skills, this tradecraft has been utilized domestically on our own people. But when you look,
I like that you mentioned that. It basically was they conducted a coup. It was China money's well sourced behind it, right?
Yeah.
And so they conducted a UW campaign in the United States and installed the Chinese Communist Party's ambassador to the U.S., known as Joseph Robinette Jeden. The Biden criminal syndicate laptop that they covered for has all the evidence to support that. So basically, if you're a federal government employee, military service member today, you probably should consider filing a Foreign Agent Registration Act filing as a sub-agent of China, because you still consider your commander-in-chief, Joseph Biden, well, he's an agent of China.
I know. So, well, yeah, and I know Kellyanne Conway just recently divulged that. So there's a bunch of other people that are coming clean on that.
I mean, that's just follow, like you said, follow the money.
Follow the money.
Follow the money.
But
10% for the big guy. That it was boilerplate language that they used in their Ukraine dealings. Gentlemen, I was on the Ukraine crisis team at the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon in 2014. So, for me, this goes back 2014, 10 years ago. I had a first or second row seat to a lot of this garbage.
Yeah, it's been going on for a long time. I mean, my concern, I guess, and is I'm just hoping.
You're going to air this on September 6th.
Yeah, well, I mean,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting there just wondering though if, man, with the numbers and everything, and is this a lot of us we have to rely on these younger generations kind of getting this, and the younger generation sort of, and I think it's happening. I think people are starting to question everything now, and I'm hoping the younger generations are kind of scratching their head and going, yeah, right. Not just understanding the talking heads on TV are just really just propaganda artists. I mean, they're not giving you news. They're not giving you truth. They're just the whole thing with Kamala just blows me away. I mean,
I'm going to refer you to a couple of.
How did she get so popular?
I don't know, but I'll tell you this: when there's free speech, if I wasn't censored, I'd have probably a couple million followers on X.
There's no doubt.
But I've been censored out of oblivion. I think I got a couple 100,000 now. And then on Rumble, it's growing. I don't know, I got 40,000 or whatever. But they're coming from somewhere. My point is they're coming from somewhere, and they're coming away from faux news.
Yep.
They're off-ramping from Facebook and Insta garbage.
That's right.
Just by the numbers. So when people think our goal here is to bankrupt those institutions that were complicit in the whole complex.
That's right.
So our goal is to minimize maximally our use to the point of zero use, unless you're in there subverting Facebook, Insta garbage, Washington compost, Roytards, New Woke slimes, raw sewage, commie search, CommieTube. Get off of there. The faster we can bankrupt them, the faster we can fix this.
No doubt.
Agreed.
And the way we bankrupt them is to limit our attention on those platforms. And then fewer advertisers are on there. because it's all about following the money.
Hey, so since I've let me go here too. So let me throw on my tinfoil hat. What is the connection with the World Health Organization and COVID?
Yes. Next question.
I mean, how do we?
Yeah, because it's
right,
certainly
so
a global it's certainly a global operation in
Yeah.
some respects.
So I'll
right,
just
so-
be the naive guy in the room, okay?
Okay, I'll answer it this way. There's a framework called in national strategy called elements of national power, right?
Yes.
You got diplomacy, you got the diplomatic landscape, the information landscape, the military landscape, and the economic landscape. So in International Relations Theory 101, basically the realism approach, and you can look all this stuff up, you have every nation is vying for sovereignty, phase 1, regional influence and dominance, phase 2, and then global hegemony, phase 3. Well, when you look at the current 193 country landscape, who are the most influential countries on the planet under those 4 particular categories of influence? Diplomacy, right? Well, a couple of factors that are important are who's a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. You got the permanent 5, right?
Yep.
China, Russia, UK, France, and the United States. Well, let's take it to the next level. Of those 5, and we can include everyone else, how many embassies and consulates and missions, they're known as, international missions, are represented globally by those nations? Well, about over 5 years ago at this point, China surpassed the number of consulates and embassies globally deployed past the United States.
That's right.
Okay? So, in that category, I argue China is in a much more influential role. In addition to how much does China have influence over on who is an employee at the United Nations at certain positions, whether it's the World Health Organization director, Tedros,
Yep.
and all the other institutions. When you start to peel that onion and you start to see the communications influence and bribery going on, why wouldn't China take control of those international institutions? Who's going to stop them? What, you think their agent in the White House is going to stop them? It's their agent. The Biden criminal syndicate is owned by China and Ukraine. So, remember, 10% for the big guy. And so, let's go into the information landscape. What are the components of information? Media, reach, big data, AI, deployment of AI and big data, and 5G. Again, I used to be a tech scout in the Silicon Valley area. Let me kind of break it down Barney style. In order to be able to have the most capable artificial intelligence, you have to have data. In order to have data, you have to collect it from a disparate range of sources. In order to have a disparate range of sources, you have to have devices. In order to have devices that provide that information, you have to have humans tethered to devices. So in China, you have 1.5 billion humans with the commensurate increasing number of devices attached to them that can be the sensors to feed the big data into the AI algorithm. Additionally, when it comes to interconnectivity, to be able to get fast current data from those sensors, you deploy 5G. China has probably the biggest 5G infrastructure deployment across the globe, far ahead of American companies, Verizon, right? AT&T, etc. So that puts China at a position, especially when they co-opt through bribery, influence, subversion, your big tech players, where they offer them up something like, hey, you want to access the Chinese market of 1.4 billion people or so, you have to play by our rules, Tommy Sturge. CommiTube. So when you violate CommiTube's policies and it says you violated China's policy, they say it up front. You violated Chinese protocol on your content, and that's why we censored you. Okay? So on the information landscape, when China installed their agent into the White House on January 20th of 2021, they have now surpassed us in terms of information element of national power. Now, let's skip over to economics, which is where we go military. On the economic landscape, a lot of that stuff overlaps. Because economically, when you have those 1.4 billion consumers, you can leverage that and all the data you've scooped up because you don't have the same privacy rules, and you just destroyed the privacy construct that was in the United States by co-opting the big tech players as well as big media outlets to gain so that they gain access to the Chinese marketplace through their products. And so now you're able to influence, coerce the conversation and the economic landscape. So China surpassed us in the economic front. I hate to say this, man, because I'm kind of like, I spent 25 years in the system myself trying to support and defend our country and the Constitution. And then on the last front, the military front, it wasn't until they implemented the illegal DOD jab mandate that pushed out all critical, the most strong-willed critical thinkers, truth tellers,
Yeah,
and those with a warrior ethos.
that's right.
That I would argue that our national security was destroyed at a level that we have not seen. But it's not to say that China has surpassed us. Culturally, our military is at its weakest ever in my lifetime.
No doubt.
The military ethos and the culture.
Yeah.
Absolute, total toxic flaccidity.
Yep.
Okay. And so, which begs the question, is that weakened state now been surpassed by the discipline and the controlled messaging internally within China to then be in a position to absolutely obliterate the toxic, feckless, stone-cold cowards that remain, that bought into the duped, manipulated, curated information landscape that was induced by obviously China, right? In part. So now, in at least three and a half categories of the four, maybe even four, in the elements of national power, China has become the global hegemon. And I've been trying to call this out since December of 2020. But they censored me digitally and then physically.
With
But now we got Elon just took over one of the biggest silos of information. So I think
yeah, I think it's key.
I know
think
that sounds negative and sad, but think about it this way: what is Elon doing? Starlink. What is Eric Prince doing? He's got a phone company, right?
right.
Unplugged. So like that infrastructure that we should have had in the first place is now being developed and deployed to then be able to counter all of this. And I think Elon Musk has no option other than to release the mother of all Twitter files to protect himself both on the business side and physically. Because the same people trying to assassinate Trump are the same people trying to assassinate Elon Musk now that he's come out all in.
Yeah.
President Trump. Anyway, hey, I'm 2 minutes over. I got my next show I got to do.
Listen,
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
It's been our pleasure, man. I sure appreciate you taking the time out, and it's been fun.
Let's
really,
do
just
another one down the road.
absolutely.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
this is just
And
great.
if you know anybody else wanted to interview me, info@Raiklin.com. I'm just on a tirade from now until September 3rd to motivate the release of the mother of all
Hey,
Twitter files.
keep sounding the shofar, my friend.
Yeah, keep blowing.
All right.
Nice.
Buddy. All right. See ya.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Pinelander podcast. If you enjoy our unique content, please consider supporting our sponsors. Soft News provides special operations news from around the world. It's where Paul and I go to keep abreast of what's going on within the SOF community. Check them out at sof.news. American Partisan. It's the vanguard movement of Western civilization. Be sure to check them out at americanpartisan.org. And, of course, Blacksmith Publishing. We've been serving the warrior class since 2013. They have a great titles written for warriors, by warriors. If you're looking for excellent reference material or just want to enjoy a great novel, be sure to check out the bookstore. Or if you enjoy hanging out with warriors, come spend some time with us in the G-Base over at the Pinelander podcast. All that's at blacksmithpublishing.com. Until our next meeting, stay mentally and tactically smart, physically and spiritually strong, and socially astute. To each other we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. May God continue to bless Pineland.